Hello, the Divine Code reading for August 6th, chapter on Sacrificial Offerings. Topic number 6. We're on page 119 and then 120. Topic 6, a burnt offering brought by a Gentile does not have to include flaying or dismembering, like the burnt offering brought by Jews in the temple. Rather, it is permitted for a Gentile to offer an animal whole, without it being skinned. If a Gentile wishes to flay and dismember the animal's carcass after it is slaughtered and before it is burned as an offering, this is a meritorious way to conduct the service to God. So the flaying and dismembering, that's skinning the animal and then cutting it up into pieces, taking out the organs, and cutting the carcass up into smaller pieces. It's considered better to do that. Why, I'm not sure, but that's how it's understood. It's more of a there's most likely, as we're taught, as we'll be taught more about this when non-Jews start to do it on private altars. It'll be explained, I'm sure, as to what is being accomplished, because so much of the sacrifice requires the correct karbanas. So we don't just do something because we're told that's how it's done. We do it with the mindset of what we're doing, and that way it affects ourselves in a better way. Therefore, there would be meditations that are occurring during the process, the different steps of the process, and there would be meditations that would be beneficial with relationship to the flaying and dismembering, that would make it a better method of doing the sacrifice. Tractate Zivachim 115b quotes 2 Bereshit regarding, Brisa regarding the burnt offerings brought by the Jews in the desert before the 10 Commandments were given. And together these imply that the Gentiles are permitted, but not obligated, to flay and dismember a carcass of a sacrificial animal. It appears that if he flayed the carcass before it was burned, it is forbidden to derive mundane benefit from the hide, and it must be burned or buried. So I guess the skinning of the animal, from what it's saying here, it would have to be destroyed. It wouldn't from what it's saying here, it would not necessarily have to be burned as part of the offering. And usually in a temple sacrifice, when the Jewish sacrifice is brought in, and according to some opinions, even when the Gentile sacrifice is brought in, when the priest would flay and dismember the sacrifice, which is normal for all sacrifices in the temple, the priest would take the skin, and he was able to use the skin. And there, within the Jewish practice, there's lots of use. You make it Torah scrolls with it, make phylacteries, mezuzahs, all sorts of things are made with the skin that could be used with the skin from the Holy Temple. And perhaps even a non-Jewish sacrifice offered in the Holy Temple might be able to do it that way. Therefore, it doesn't have the requirement that it be burned, but it has to be. You cannot benefit. The non-Jew cannot benefit from the skin offered on a private altar, or I guess anybody cannot benefit from it. Therefore, it would either have to be burned or buried in such a way it's not going to be used. This might be similar to today when bread dough is a piece of the bread dough is taken off. In the temple times, it would be given to the kohen. That's what they call the challah. It's taken off. It's given to the kohen. Today, it would have to be destroyed, and usually that means it would be burned. People turn their ovens on to high, and they put it in. They burn it to a crisp, and then they can toss it out. That appears from this to be what happens to the animal hide. Something to that effect. So if that's true, it's a convenience to burn it with the altar. Whether or not that's proper to do something as a convenience, I don't know. This is all the complicated stuff that has to be learned out better. The rabbis have to dig into this more in order, this chapter on sacrifices, by the time that the non-Jew is actually doing a sacrifice, needs to be a lot, needs to be a library of knowledge that needs to exist before Gentiles are doing sacrifices on private altars. Topic number 7. A Gentile may not offer any animal that is missing a limb. Tosafot on Tractate of Avodah Zarah 5b. Rikva on Tractate of Avodah Zarah, also 5b. The opinion of Tosafot there is that it is a firm prohibition for a Gentile to offer an animal that is missing a limb on his personal altar, even if he did not designate it in a vow to bring it beforehand. I would assume that means that the animal was whole with all its limbs. If he made a vow to offer it, when he said, this animal I'm going to bring as a sacrifice, a particular animal. That particular animal had a farm accident. Something happened, and now it's missing a limb. He would apparently not be allowed to bring even that animal. He would have to work something else out. Tosafot asked where Gentiles are warned about this, and answers that it is a prohibition that is derived from a positive commandment, as it says in Sifrei on Leviticus 22:17, any man, etc., which includes Gentiles who donate a vow and vow to bring a burnt offering. Therefore, since we learn out from the verse, and Noah brought from all the beasts, etc., that a Gentile's burnt offering needs to be complete and not missing a limb, and one who offers an animal that is missing a limb violates the commandment and has not fulfilled his vow, and he must bring a valid sacrifice to fulfill the vow. So he vows to bring an animal, and if this part is referring to a specific animal, or if it just he vows to bring a animal. If he vows to bring a animal, he can bring any animal. That's part of the category that he vowed. If he vows to bring a specific animal and something happens to that animal, apparently he's still required to bring a similar animal if the first animal is not acceptable. If I'm reading this correctly, it's a little vague, but he would if he vowed a specific animal and that animal was not valid, then he would have to bring another animal as a substitute for the first animal. It seems to be saying, and where Noah brought from all the animals, in the language there, it indicates all being complete. Or there's something in the language I recall that it says that it implies a complete animal. Continuing, a Gentile who may not offer an animal that is missing a limb or a bird that is missing a limb or a ritually impure species of animal or bird. If any of these is offered as a sacrifice, it is invalid. So it can't be missing a limb, either an animal, a mammal, kosher mammal, or a kosher bird. If it's missing a limb, bird's missing its wing or something, then it's not allowed. Or if it's a ritually impure, somebody brought an animal besides the ones that are counted as kosher animals. It doesn't have to be one of the animals that is in this, that's in the temple. That's a much smaller list of animals. But if he brought, I don't know, a buzzard is understood to be not kosher, that would not be acceptable to bring on an altar. Oh, continuing the footnote on animals missing limbs. See part 3. It's on the prohibition of eating the limb of a living animal. Footnote 67. Rambam disagrees, and the Torah law is not like the opinion of the Tosafot regarding the obligation of a Gentile to uphold his type of vow. Nevertheless, we may accept the opinion of Tosafot that the sacrifice is invalid, even if one is not obligated to replace it. So the question as to whether or not, if the person vows to bring he vows to bring a sheep, a particular sheep. He points to a sheep, says that he's vowing to sacrifice that specific sheep. If that specific sheep had an accident, lost a limb, the question is whether or not he's required to take another sheep, a similar sheep, and sacrifice it, or if that's just, he can't sacrifice it because it's not allowed. That's the question that's going back and forth here, and apparently apparently the Divine Code is going with the Rambam, saying it would not be required to be replaced. And however, the Tosafot, the Divine Code also agrees with Tosafot that the sacrifice would still be invalid. So he can't sacrifice that the limb, the animal that's missing a limb, even if it was valid to be sacrificed. Topic number 8. During the time that the temple existed in Jerusalem, a Gentile was permitted to bring his sacrifice to the temple for the Jewish priest to offer it to God on his behalf. The only sacrifice accepted from a Gentile in the temple is a burnt offering of an unblemished male animal or bird, whether female or male. That's the bird could be either female or male. It must be fitting to be offered in the temple according to all specifications. And it's much more stricter. First of all, which animals can be sacrificed? The non-Jew can sacrifice a giraffe. You can't, if the non-Jew can figure out how to sacrifice, you could sacrifice a giraffe on a private altar. You could not bring a giraffe into the holy temple and have it sacrificed. So it's a much shorter list of animals. It continues here. The only animals fitting to be offered in the temple are cows, that'd be a bull, is male, sheep, or goats. So those three, and those are the farm animals. Those are three types of animals, and they have to be a male. And the only fitting birds are doves or pigeons. So those are the two types of birds that are allowed in the temple, and that could either be a male or a female of those two, of the doves or the pigeons. And according to all specifications, it's much more complicated what's allowed. You know, it has to be without blemish. So if it has if it's got like a wound or something that didn't miss, it's not missing a limb, but it's got certain types of wounds would be considered a blemish. That would not be acceptable. And there's a story of a Roman government leader, who had a sacrifice brought to the temple, and when it came to the temple, it had a blemish. And the priests were trying to figure out, you know, if we don't accept this animal, it would be acceptable on the Gentiles' personal altar. So the Gentiles would consider the animal as permissible. However, it was not acceptable in the temple. So the priests are having a big debate about this. What are we going to do? Because this is a Roman leader. They wanted the peace. They didn't want to have problems with it, but they could not accept that animal that had the blemish. So the rules are much stricter in the temple than it is for a personal altar. And it's a much more, the teaching of that is way beyond the scope of what they're doing in the divine code, which is more specific for the non-Jew. There's libraries written on what's done in the temple. This is also described in Rambam and the Laws of the Sacrificial Procedures, Chapter 3, Topic 2. Topic number 9. The types of altars permitted for Gentiles to build for themselves for offering burnt sacrifices to God upon them, and the types of sacrifices that are permitted for a Gentile to bring into the holy temple are only permitted if the offering is brought as a voluntary service to God. It is, however, forbidden for a Gentile to make a formal obligation upon himself to bring sacrifices, since it is forbidden to add additional commandments. So when a non-Jew, when a Gentile brings one of these sacrifices on a personal altar, it's something he's doing freely. It cannot be considered an obligatory thing, a religious obligation. The Jews have religious obligations regarding sacrifices. The non-Jew cannot take it on as a religious obligation. And that's true for many of the commandments, you know, such as prayer, which is very similar to sacrifice. The non-Jew can pray voluntarily and even pray regularly, but he cannot take it on as a requirement that he pray. The Jew has it as a requirement to pray. The non-Jew should pray and is encouraged to pray and can pray on a regular basis, but cannot take it on as a commandment. Thank you.